don't yuck my yum. Teaching students, instead of using terminology like, ew, that's gross, or I don't like that, how can you eat that? And giving your students the tools to express in a way that's respectful.
Welcome to Educator University. As teachers, we know how challenging it can be to make every student feel seen and connected. But what if food could be the bridge, sparking curiosity, building empathy, and bringing your classroom together? Today's guest, Alex DeSorbo-Quinn, is Executive Director of Pilot Light and an expert in public health and education. She helps teachers use the universal language of food to inspire and empower students. She shares simple, no-cost strategies you can start tomorrow to make your classroom more inclusive, creative, and connected. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about our conversation.
Me too. I'm so excited for teachers to learn so much from you. Let's just start with the big question. Why food? Why is food a powerful tool for connecting students in the classroom?
Well, we all eat, and we have that in common. But beyond that, and just beyond food being part of that universal experience, it's something that we all connect to, and we can use food to connect to other aspects of our lives, to connect to culture, family, science, history. Food is all of that at once. And when students can see their own experiences reflected in what they're learning, that helps them feel seen and valued, and that's where that learning begins.
Yeah, and I think teachers are hearing this, they're thinking, yeah, our kids like food, our students love food, right? We bring, we have snacks or lunches, things like that, and they're excited for that time of the day. If they're thinking in their mind right now, well, I don't have a kitchen in my classroom. I'm just a teacher that teaches science or whatever, English. What does food mean for those kinds of teachers? What does it look like for integrating that connection?
Well, that's what Pilot Light's all about. We were founded in 2010 by leading Chicago chefs who were inspired by First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign. They wanted to bring the power of food into classrooms. Much like what we were just talking about, food is that great connector. It's that shared language, and they wanted to impart that experience to students. They weren't quite sure where to start. They initially sat down with the principal and teachers at one Chicago public school and basically said, like, how can we do this and how can we help? And the response was, partner with teachers to integrate food into learning. So what you described it's exactly what we do. We provide teachers with professional development, with resources, with actually stipends, depending on the programs. But we invest in teachers in bringing this work into their classrooms and connecting it to learning. So teachers are teaching math and science and social studies and truly whatever subject, you can teach it through food. And in doing that, you're engaging your students, but they're also learning about their food system. And that's really important. We have a very complex food system, and our students on average receive about 8 hours of food or nutrition education annually, and that's nationwide. So empowering teachers to bring this into classrooms can really make a big difference for students. But again, that engagement through food is, we hear from teachers all the time that it's a motivating factor to keep doing it, because teachers tell us, oh, my kids' attendance is higher on food education or Pilot Light days. My kids' eyes are lighting up. They're raising hands. They're making connections to their families. They're going home and sharing it with their families. And that's what food can do.
So does your program include actually consuming the food, or is it more just the learning of the food?
It depends on the teacher and the program. First, I'll sort of frame when I say food education what that means. And I know you're in food studies, so you can probably very much appreciate this. But as an organization, we realized as we were growing and expanding and partnering with teachers and getting a lot of questions about this, we realized there wasn't a great definition of food education. So, and there wasn't a definition for teachers. So in about 2016, we started in this process to define food education and to develop what we call our food education standards. And we knew that wasn't something that we could do alone. So we partnered with experts from across the country in fields of food and child development and education. And together we came up with 7 standards, which I encourage your listeners to check out on our website. But those standards, they are a blueprint for teachers who want to bring this into their classrooms and integrate food into learning. And they're an incredibly powerful tool as far as like how teachers can bring this in. Like I said, they're a blueprint. So a teacher might say, oh, I want to teach I'm teaching my students poetry. I'm going to do a lesson around food education standard number one, which is food connects us to each other. And I have students write their own food memoirs or food stories connecting to their culture, their background. Or we had a middle school teacher teaching proportion. So in that case, I should go back. Food, you don't even necessarily need food in the classroom. It's drawing on students' memories and experiences and maybe some recipes that they bring in from their families. But a middle school teacher teaching proportional ratios scaled up a vegan pancake recipe with his students and actually had the ingredients in the classroom. And as the students were preparing those pancakes, they were enjoying them as a class. They were having a shared meal. There was a lot of joy, but also engagement and lessons that students will take with them. So it's great when food can be there. We know that's a challenge for a lot of teachers, and it's not a critical component depending on the lesson.
Curious in terms of a teacher listening and they're thinking, I want to incorporate more food and these standards in. Are there some kind of low lifts a teacher could use in their classroom, some activities that you would recommend that they could start with?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it depends on your school and what resources you have, but most schools have a cafeteria. Many schools have school gardens. We work with a lot of schools that have something called the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, where produce boxes are delivered into the classrooms. And these are opportunities where teachers can look to what's around them and leverage those resources to bring them into the classroom. So, to use the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program as an example, we have teachers who are connecting directly to those food boxes coming into the classrooms, and they don't have to buy any food. It's already there through this USDA program, but they're pairing the tastings with these quick lessons that include a short reflection and are really built around getting students to try these new foods, to try this produce and build their curiosity. But students who had maybe never tried bok choy or fennel or blueberries, they're suddenly connecting to those foods. They're building curiosity. They're building their vocabulary. There's science lessons embedded with it, and it's all through those food boxes that are coming in.
Yeah, they're really being exposed to different kinds of ingredients that maybe they weren't initially exposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder, does part of your program include talking about where this food comes from in terms of like farm to table, things like how it's grown and those kinds of things?
Absolutely. Our second food education standard is food has sources and origins. And our third food education standard is food and the environment are interconnected. There's so many, especially in science lessons, where teachers dig into exploring how food grows. We just had a pre K teacher last year who did a whole lesson on seasonality with her students. And then the school actually got a hydroponic garden donated and they built it together as a class and they started growing strawberries, and I think it was in the basement of the school. And that lesson kind of turned this idea of seasonality on its head. But I trying to think of some other good examples of that. uh we have teachers who teach maybe history or social studies, and they're teaching about migration through foodways. We have a lesson that's always been very popular around the taco al pastor, and students are learning about the taco al pastor and all the different ingredients and spices that go into it, and they research the origins of those spices. And they follow them and their path, going from the Middle East to Spain and Portugal to Mexico and then up to the United States, where those dishes are interpreted by folks here, and they change over time, but they're carrying those paths and carrying the culture and the traditions of the people along the way.
Yeah, you're giving me ideas for my classroom actually. I currently teach foods, as I mentioned before, and yeah, I'm thinking that's a good lesson I could take on right now. And I have the luxury of having kitchens in my classroom, so we can actually cook this food. But I'm thinking now, going back to those teachers that are in the classroom, more classroom based, maybe they don't want to touch food. Maybe they're not really into the food, touching the food and actually consuming it.
Mm,
The kids. Could you
right.
give some different prompts they could use to help include food in the conversation for maybe storytelling or writing or learning and connecting?
Yeah, for sure. To your point, that's fabulous that you have a kitchen, by the way. That's amazing. uh, and we have some classrooms that have kitchens. We have classrooms that have things like mobile kitchen carts, and those are wonderful resources, but you don't need those to teach about food. You just need that curiosity. And I mean, you can have a quick discussion with your students about a favorite snack or a food that they brought from home. Or teachers can use they can use texts that you're reading in the classroom that might include a story of food in them that helps the students connect to the characters that they're reading about through learning about the foods that they're eating and their cultural traditions. Teachers, like I said before, sometimes they use school meals or the school gardens as prompts. I mentioned earlier that our first standard is food connects us to each other. And that's a really easy way to bring this into the classroom. Just this idea of having conversations about foods. We've had teachers have their students talk about, what are their favorite food memories, or what are some recipes they like to prepare with their families at home. And those spark conversations that reveal to students their similarities, but also their differences, and help them build relationships and build empathy. And yeah, it can all of these lessons can be sparked by something very simple.
Yeah, and I think that one thing you mentioned when I was reading about your program, it mentions how food can also create empathy and respect as well as connection. So, could you talk a little bit more about what that looks like in terms of the program that you put together, or you're part of? Sorry. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I mentioned before we have a program called Snack Time Explorers that uh, through these food boxes that are delivered. And I should explain, there's a program called the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. It's actually funded by the Farm Bill, but it comes through the USDA. And 2.7 million students across the United States, mostly in Title I schools, are receiving these boxes of fresh cut produce in their classrooms. And they're meant to be a learning opportunity. And what we've done at Pilot Light, we partnered with a produce company called DNO Produce out of Columbus, Ohio, to create a program called Snack Time Explorers. And that program provides teachers with a plug and play resource that they can use to really leverage these boxes of fresh produce coming into their classrooms, and to create through that produce to create those points of curiosity, to create those opportunities for connection. And one of the components of those lessons is this idea of like, don't yuck my yum. And teaching students like to say that, I've tried it. That's not for me. Instead of using terminology like, ew, that's gross, or I don't like that. How can you eat that? And it's just like a simple example of how through language and giving your students the tools to express how they're feeling about it in a way that's respectful and empathetic. It's a really important component of the program, but kind of like thinking about how that goes deeper, especially at older grade levels. We had a middle school humanities teacher in New York City welcomed in a school nutrition professional to talk about their work. And it led to a discussion with their classroom around different religious holidays like Ramadan. And the students who were new to the concept of Ramadan, but sort of related it to their own experiences during Lent. And it led to this larger discussion about food bringing people together. And again, coming back to our first food education standard, food connects us to each other, learning about through food, different cultures, different religions, that people do things differently, that food plays a role in that, in building that respect and empathy through others, all through those learnings.
That's what a great. I feel like food's something that connects us in a way that just kind of goes beyond a lot of other things that can work that way. So I love that idea of it building empathy, and like the idea of having preferences and building people's connections like that really makes me happy. It makes me smile as a teacher of food. So I
And
love
I'm
that.
sure you see it all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and I actually like that phrase, "Don't yuck my yum," because 'cause I've not heard that before, and I like that because I tell students what I tell them is it's okay to have preferences, everyone has preferences, and so but I think that, that kind of is a better way of saying it in a way too as well.
It does take off, especially with the younger grade levels. I have 3 kids of my own, and they're 5, 6, and 9, and once they learned "Don't yuck my yum," it just became like a mantra in our house. So it's fun, but respectful. So
Yeah, and it's actually a bigger concept in life in that we have different ideas on other people, and we can respect the fact that people think differently, and, we all have our own way of doing things, so, yeah, I like that.
exactly. Like I said, food is a great way to learn about our differences and similarities, and to appreciate that we all have them, and that's okay. And, we can still build relationships and be friendly to each other.
Yes. As you're talking, I was gonna ask you a question of thinking, does your program work with the food program in terms of the school lunch or breakfast program? Is that part of what you guys do?
Yeah, we don't work with the school breakfast program, although that would be a great opportunity for students or for teachers to bring food education to the classrooms. But we do some work with the National School Lunch Program. During the pandemic, we worked with an organization called the Urban School Food Alliance to create a curriculum that connected common school meals to classroom learning. And a few years ago, we sort of leveraged that curriculum into a program, and we've been delivering that program in New York City public schools for the past few years. And what we do is, like I was saying about our work more broadly, we recruit teachers, they apply, they're selected to be part of this cohort where they receive professional development and support from our team. They receive a stipend, and in turn, they're bringing food education, and in this case, into their literacy lessons in New York. And part of that program is connecting teachers to their school nutrition staff and building those relationships, building appreciation for the what each other does, and through those connections, creating opportunities for school meals to connect to students. So I mentioned earlier students learning about Ramadan and this concept of fasting through that humanities teacher in New York who was actually engaged in that program. But we had a similar example of in New York City, just by students having that entry point and in knowing who these folks are, which often these conversations and these relationships don't exist and often in schools or districts. So building that connection point allowed students in another school to advocate for halal meals on the menu. So connecting to school meals, it's not just, like I said, an opportunity to bring that food education to the classroom, but there's also opportunities for students just by learning that process and learning about school meals to advocate for change and to make their voices heard around different menus that they might want to see, what they like or what they don't. And that's really powerful.
It's really encouraging for you to hear that there was a change, or for me to hear. It's encouraging to hear that there was a change in the menu because I just think, unfortunately, in the school system district that I'm at, I think the lunches are not that great from what I hear from students. I don't eat them, but in fact, I've been told I will make something in my class because I teach foods, and so we'll make like a pizza or something just like delicious, of course. And they're like, why can't the lunch staff make this for us? You know what I mean? And I want these are kids making this food. They're making the food for themselves. I just think it is hard. It's good to hear that this program is potentially helping to shift and give kids advocacy in that process, you know?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
our school lunch programs, they're the biggest restaurants in the country. They feed, I mean, just in Chicago, they feed like 350,000 students a day, which is crazy to think about how complex that is and the amount of food and all of the different regulations that our school nutrition services have to comply with. By connecting students to what that looks like, what that means, like you were saying, there's opportunities for advocacy. And I think um, uh, when we think more broadly about the importance of this work, if we're not teaching our next generation about the food system as a whole, if we're not giving them those opportunities to use their voice, that change will never happen. So really, that comes back to why this is so critical. There does has to be there we do need to see change in school meals, but also more broadly across the country and across the world. And by investing in our kids and just making this part of their everyday learning experience, they will be equipped to create that change.
Yeah, and your nonprofit is really focusing on that work. So I'm kind of curious, the nonprofit that you work for, did you start this or something that you kind of came into? And I'm kind of curious also, like, what exactly, yeah, I'm kind of curious how it began.
Sure. So, like I said before, we were founded by chefs and
Yeah.
leading chefs here in Chicago, really incredible people who cared a lot about their community and they wanted to bring that power of food into classrooms. So they connected with principal and teachers at one Chicago public school. And actually, the early program looks different than it does now. In connecting with the school leadership and those teachers, they started partnering with teachers to develop lessons that taught different subject areas through food, so or different units through food. So the teachers would say like, "Oh, I'm teaching the American Revolution," and they would come up with a whole lesson on making your own tea and learning about the Boston Tea Party. Or I'm teaching about plate tectonics, and they would come up with a lesson about really learning about plate tectonics through an egg and how small changes in temperature in an egg change the composition. What was different about that work then was that those lessons would culminate in a lunch that day that the chefs had prepared. And they worked with the school nutrition staff in that school to prepare that. They were doing that for a few years and then realized they had something really special. Like there was some really incredible impact happening at this one Chicago public school. And they did some fundraising and raised enough to bring on a staff member. So that they hired me. So I was the first staff member and executive director at Pilot Light. And I count myself very lucky and fortunate to have gotten this role and to have had their trust. We've been working closely ever since to take this program at Disney 2 Magnet School in Chicago and grow it first throughout the city of Chicago and now nationwide. We're coast to coast. I know you're in Oregon. We have some teachers in Oregon. We have teachers in New York City and San Francisco. Rural, urban, suburban communities, we've worked with about 550 teachers. And we've seen that by investing in teachers and partnering with teachers to bring food education into their classrooms and to teach through food. Teachers are so well equipped to do that, no matter the grade level, the subject area, the community, the backgrounds of the students. Teachers can adapt that learning using our food education standards. They can adapt that learning to bring food education to life for their students. And I'm sure you know very well, your kids trust their teachers. And so this really important information is coming from a trusted adult. And yeah, we've been really excited by the growth. And we just actually completed a new 5-year strategic plan. And in that plan is a goal to grow 30, to reach 10,000 teachers and 300,000 students across the country. So I encourage all of your listeners to check out our website and get on our mailing list because we have a number of programs that we offer that teachers can apply to and enroll in. But we also have free resources on our Food Education Center. We have right now, I think, about 135 lessons up there. Our food education standards are up there for free, and we'll soon be launching online learning modules and professional development more broadly to teachers who are just looking to get a taste of this and think about ways in which they can incorporate it into their classrooms.
Yeah, your organization and you as well are really serving and supporting teachers. And that's just really nice to hear for me. And I'm sure listening, it's nice to feel that support from people outside maybe of the school system itself. It's just nice to hear you guys that people are caring about us and our students and what they're learning. So I'm a little curious in terms of the application process. Teachers go to your website and apply for these stipends in terms of doing this, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that. As you can probably tell, we invest in teachers, we center teachers in our work, and we know that your work is really hard. And in some ways, this is one more thing, and we recognize that financial resources are necessary, but also having people on the other side of the screen or who are creating the resources who really understand that. And we have a team of people who are our staff. They're just incredibly empathetic and they're thinking about teachers all the time and what they need and how they can support them. Many of them are actually former teachers, and that really comes through both in our programs and resources. And I'm incredibly proud of that. But to come back to your question around the application process, it depends on the program. We have our Food Education Fellowship, which we invest in teacher leaders throughout the country who want to bring food education into their classrooms on a weekly basis. These are pre-K through 12th grade teachers covering all content areas. We actually have a music teacher this year, which I'm super excited about. We've had, of course, math, science, social studies. We've had all, elementary all content teachers. We had an AP human geography teacher a couple of years ago. It just goes to show you could teach anything through food. Teachers interested in that program can apply in the spring. And if you get on our mailing list or, follow us on social media, we're at Pilot Light Chefs. But you'll see when those applications are launched and you'll go through the application process. But we have another program that I mentioned called Snack Time Explorers, which it depends on right now the district that you're teaching in. And we're primarily in the Midwest and like Mid-Atlantic with that program. But if your district is enrolled in that program, then teachers can apply to be part of it. We actually launched our fall cohort last night, and we have an incredible group of teachers who are interested in bringing this into their classrooms and tying to those fresh fruit and vegetable program food boxes that they're receiving. But they're interested in being leaders of this work in their school communities, engaging other teachers to join in future cohorts. So, and yeah, those are kind of our two main programs that are available right now. But like I said, definitely sign up because more opportunities will be coming online.
I'm sure to link your website right below this video.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we talked about so much, and I'm just like kind of basking in it right now. I'm like, wow, this is a lot. Really a lot of information about how food connects and kind of the vision you have for your program, which really is supporting teachers. So thank you guys for doing that. Are there any final thoughts you want to share with my audience before we kind of finish the conversation?
Well, like I mentioned, we have a whole library of free resources. So definitely check out our Food Education Center. Follow us on social media. Our food education standards were just updated and revised, and we republished those this summer. I mentioned we'd published those in 2018, and the new standards have extended to pre-K. So they're pre-K through 12th grade. There's crosswalks in there to other sets of standards that teachers are commonly using so that they can be that blueprint or roadmap for bringing this to life in your classroom. But the revised standards draw on the feedback of hundreds of teachers across the country who have used these standards to date. And we're really proud of how they reflect that feedback and reflect those experiences of our teachers. And they're just super practical and adaptable. So if your teacher listeners are interested in just even thinking about what this could look like in their classrooms, how you teach through food, what are some simple ways to bring this in? Our standards can be that guide in addition to those lessons, and they're front and center on our website, which is www.pilotlightchefs.org.
It's always nice to have things already available instead of making from scratch. So that's great. You have things people can just kind of plug and play and use in their classrooms. So that's great. Before we finish today, I always have some fun questions for my guests, for the audience to get to know you a little better. Just four little fun questions, and you can answer as short or as long as you like.
Sure.
The first question here is your favorite lunch.
Well, I'm in Chicago and we just got some colder weather here and I love soup for lunch. So whether I'm home or in the office, I'll make some soup. I've made a lot of chicken soup lately because my husband was under the weather. But also this week I made my family favorite called we call it beans and greens, and it's just cannellini beans and escarole and like there's a lot of garlic and a chicken broth, and I put a little bit of sausage in there. But soup is a lunchtime staple for me.
That sounds so good and warm and cozy too.
Yeah.
I don't know if this totally applies to you, this teachers, but your best behavior management or emotional regulation tip.
Well, I'm not a teacher, but I do have three kids. And what's worked for me recently, I feel like as they grow, I'm constantly learning and adapting. But my fourth grader has a quiet area in the house where when we recognize that he has a lot of big feelings, he can go to his quiet corner. He has some books there. He likes arts and crafts, and then it gives us an opportunity to talk about what he's feeling. But at home.
Oh, as teachers, we do that too. We have a spot oftentimes in our classroom for that space. We call it a calm corner. We have the same thing in our classroom. That's a great reminder to have that as well. Love that.
Yeah.
Uh,
He's like,
yeah,
he
I think
actually,
we all need it.
it makes him feel good to know that that's an opportunity.
I think I need a quiet corner. I feel like sometimes I just need a moment, right? We all do,
We all do, especially late on a Friday like it is today.
right? Good, that's good. How about a teacher that made a difference in your life?
So many. I recently was at a conference and met somebody just at a networking event. And in conversation, I realized that he lived in my hometown. So much so I asked him, like, what street do you live on? It was just so funny. And I live in Chicago. My hometown is in upstate New York in the capital region. And when I realized where he lived and he'd mentioned he had two young daughters, I asked if they went to the elementary school that I went to. And he said that they did. And I thought back, I said, oh, do either of them have Mrs. Gilday, who was my fourth grade teacher? He's like, oh, actually, my daughter does. And I went home that night. I was just like, oh my gosh, she's still teaching. And I went home that night and I went on the school website, which I had never been on as an adult, which was sort of funny. It felt like a very long time ago. But I found her email and I sent her a note and she wrote me back. And it happened to be during Teacher Appreciation Week, so it just felt very fitting. She was just a wonderful teacher and made a big impact on me. And I can vividly, I actually remember learning through food in one of her classes. We got to develop a project where we made smoothies, and or at least me, my partner and I made smoothies. So I'm always ask people like, oh, do you remember learning about food in school? And most people say, I don't, like other than home ec. And I don't really either, except for that class where I remember she gave us the freedom to come up with a project. And I can't remember all the details, but it was very exciting to have food in the classroom and to be able to invent something.
And she planted the seed to what you're doing now in a way. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Full
Yeah.
circle moment there. Yeah. The last question here is last lesson you taught.
Well, I'm not a teacher, but the last lesson I taught, this is a hard one for me to answer. I mean, I have 3 kids, so I feel like there's a lot of lessons at home.
Yeah, that works.
I mean, I just, we have a really wonderful team at Pilot Light, and I relish any chance that I get to, especially spend time with our team members with all of them, but team members who are in their early careers. And there's just so many opportunities with that around, like my own background is in public health research, so sometimes in the evaluation space I have the opportunity to share something, or in the program management space. And I love that experience of sharing that knowledge, and when I see it being implemented, that's incredibly satisfying too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how even if we're not teachers, we actually are teaching lessons we don't know all the time, even just with one person sharing something new
Oh,
they might not know. Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Alex, thank you so much for all this information and for all the resources that you and your nonprofit are bringing to the space. If the audience wants to reach you, you mentioned it before, but just to clarify, where can they reach you? And I will also again link it in the description right below this video.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me. They can learn more about Pilot Light at www.pilotlightchefs, and that's chefs with an S at the end, .org. You can follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, all at Pilot Light Chefs. And then you can email us. Our general email is info@pilotlightchefs.org. We would love to hear from you. Love to share more about our programs, our food education standards, our resources. Our mission is to put food education or integrated food education into the hands of teachers nationwide, and just to make it part of how kids learn. And we've heard over and over again that when teachers see their students' eyes light up and they are bringing this new model of teaching into their classrooms, it invigorates their practice, and it's something they stick with. And so I invite your listeners to try it. Again, check out our resources, but I hope you'll reach out to us and dig into some of the programs that we offer. We compensate teachers, we pay teachers, we invest in teachers to do this work. So there's lots of options that will be coming online throughout the year.
Thank you so much for sharing everything today. I'm excited to hear your teachers in the comments share what they're going to do and how they incorporate your resources and maybe even join your program. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Annie.